Hi, so first of all, it's really a pleasure for me to be here today. I think it's a good idea to have someone representing an energy company, an energy provider on the panel. And as Stephen shows with the poll today in Quebec, we sometimes like to do things a little bit differently. So for my remarks, I will really focus on energy decision-making situation in Quebec, and I'm going to use a really genuine and specific example. So as you might know, Quebec has a really ambitious greenhouse gas emission reduction target, minus 37.5% by 2030. And to meet these targets, Quebec aims at reducing its oil consumption by 40%. Yes, there's a lot of hydroelectricity in Quebec, but it's still, oil is still 40% of our portfolio, and we're looking at reducing by 40% the consumption and increasing the share of renewable energy. So last night people were talking about that. Major changes are needed in energy system, but also in consumption habits, and as well as a need for innovation. So the key question are policy clear and consistent enough, and to what extent they are aligned with regulatory frameworks to enable energy companies such as Énergir to play a role in the transition to a lower carbon economy. So I will address this question by looking specifically at the development of renewable natural gas in Quebec. So RNG is basically methane produced from organic waste that is clean and that can be injected in our network afterwards. So it is a solution that companies like ours and other LDC can provide to their customers that are looking to sometimes be totally carbon neutral or to just have a more sustainable supply. So let me take you through our RNG journey. So phase one, it was almost 10 years ago. It was back in 2009. The Quebec government at the time launched an environmental policy to divert organic waste from landfill in order to capture methane. So at the time, municipalities were presented two options, and one of the options was to produce renewable natural gas. So in order to help the municipalities, the government came with a program with subsidies to help them to put infrastructure in place to produce RNG. But at the time, there were no market, there were no buyers. Why is that? It's because the price of RNG is higher than the price of traditional gas. So we worked as an LDC for months with municipalities to develop a business model that we thought was making sense as much for producer than for our customer. So at the end, we came up with a model in which we would invest in cleaning facility, and then we would inject the gas in our network. So, and to come up with this model, it took us almost 3 years. And we needed to challenge ourselves because as a utility, as a monopoly, truly, let's say that risk-taking is not really part of our DNA. Neither is innovation, but we're working on it. I think we're getting better at it. So there were technical and economical challenges that we needed to address. So in 2012, we finally filed this model to the Régie. And basically, Louis, I'll summarize. The answer was no, it is not the mission of an LDC to get involved in the upstream distribution activities. And the Régie sent another message. They say there's a need to adjust our legal framework to enable us to support someday those kind of projects, which bring us to phase two. So for the next few years, we worked to put pieces of the puzzle together to come up with enabling condition to get this new RNG project going on. So exactly 2 years ago, in April of 2016, the Quebec government launched their energy policy, the 2030 energy policy, which included an engagement to support clearly RNG. A good example of that is that in the policy and in the action plan, there's the intention of setting targets along the way, let's say for 2020 and 2022, 2025, 2030, of a minimal content of RNG in the natural gas system. Well, we're now 2 years later. The government still works on it. The session is coming to an end. There's an election in October, and the regulation has not been adopted yet. So there's another filing in front of the Régie. We filed last July. We're confident that the Régie understands the importance of RNG, but although there have been changes since 2012, 6 years ago, we do not have the full regulatory environment in place at the moment to support the RNG industry. But because it was so important for us, because producers continue to knock on our door, private and municipality, and because we start having demands for customer And 3 years ago, customer wanted RNG but didn't want to pay for it. Now they're willing to pay for it. And so we decide to move and to take some risk and make things happen. So we finally announced a first RNG injection project in our system and a first deal with L'Oréal, not to name it, which is now 100% carbon neutral, which is having 100% of its supply in RNG in last December. But we did that without having approval from the Régie on the old business model and without having the enabling government regulation in place. So based on this simple, but not that simple example, I guess my key takeaways are the following. There is a clear need for better alignment between environmental and energy policy, but also between every public policy. It needs to be consistent. The timing needs to be relevant. There is a need for better alignment between policies and regulatory framework. In the example I gave you, the Régie sent a signal, but it took years for something and for policies to adapt. And there is a need to create space for innovation. Yeah, Lisa was talking about innovation. Too often, customers wait for us. They're putting pressure on us. We would like to be before them, but sometimes they're pushing us. And sometimes we feel that we're waiting for the regulator, and sometimes the regulator itself is waiting for the government. So, and then times pass, and the objectives are really ambitious for the transition. So we become at risk of not meeting customers' needs and citizen needs, which means in the RNG example, the supply is going away. California is giving much more money and is buying the private landfill RNG that is produced right now in Quebec, and that's so sad. That's an important percentage of our gas supply that goes away because of that. And some customers just switch energy, they can move, so, and no one wins when a customer leaves the system. So as a company, we have to move faster, we need to be more agile, but all the energy decision makers system need to move forward faster, even, and maybe that's the key thing, that we might not all be aligned, even if it's not perfectly set. Sometimes we need to work into gray zone. Last night, people were talking about, should we go fast or should we be perfectly aligned? Maybe the answer is somewhere in between if we want to transition one day. Thank you.